things going on that I just that I needed to express or to differentiate or whatever it was. And the things that came into mind were just Jewish texts, even though, I went to university, I read a lot. My parents encouraged me to read, but that's the first thing that comes to mind, like Ma Hashem Elokecha Doresh Meimach. Like that's the first question you ask, right? When something comes around, you ask, okay, what's the right thing to do? Um, and so, and also when this government came into power, it was very obvious to us that we would be, unless we made it known that we weren't, we would be lumped in with these policies as religious Jews. Like I have a shaitel, obviously people are going to think that I um support this government and its policies, or mostly. And so yes, so this is me admitting for the first time that sometimes it does require to be brave to do something, and this is, for me, this is brave. Um, since I'm going to be followed by two esteemed rabbis. I also prepared some Torah for to share with you. There's actually this conception about the Tanakh, like when we talk about the Zionist movement, both religious and secular, we tend to say that they sort of dropped the 2,000-year tradition of the Talmud and went back to the Tanakh, and that you have much, because the Tanakh talks about power and kings and occupation, wars and all that kind of thing. So it sort of was useful for the narrative. And so for a long time, I sort of agreed with this like urban legend that the Tanakh is all about violence, and like that you can't refer to it in order without tempering it with the all the parshanim and all of the traditions that we have. You're going to only find that kind of thing in it. And then I started sometimes just reading really random when, because when people ask me to speak, I like to also like, again, that's my language, right? And I realized that it's not always the case. Um, and I have a question. It's rhetoric. I mean, you can write it in the chat, but uh, anyone here, is there anyone here who doesn't know somebody named David? David, David, whatever. I I'm pretty sure you all know someone with that name. How many of you know a person named Yoav or Avshalom? Probably less, probably younger people, right? And how many of you know about the wise woman of Tkoa, Aisha Chachama Mitkoa? I don't know. She's part of a story, of a timeline where basically David and Avshalom, it's a very dramatic, story of a father and a son struggling for power. And it starts off with, we'll start the timeline with David's big transgression, which is sending Uriah off to battle to be killed so he could have Bathsheba, for which he's berated. And then there's the story of Amnon v'Tamar, which is basically incest in the family and rape. It's a very bad story, and he doesn't really address it. So Avshalom takes it upon himself, and he murders Amnon, the rapist, and then he has to leave, and it's the beginning of a civil war. There's, it's not happening yet, but it's on the cusp. And so Yoav, who is David's how do you say, his general, realizes that this is going to happen, and he decides to go about it in a very interesting way. He turns to this woman whose name we don't know. Her name is just Aisha Chachama Mitkoa, the wise woman of Tkoa. and he tells her to present herself to David as someone in mourning and to tell him this story. So she comes to him, and the story is that she has two sons. One of them murdered the other because of a battle over land. And now she's being told that the just thing to do would be to kill her other son as revenge. And she's asking advice from David, and she says, let me see. כי ישמע המלך להציל את מותו מכף האיש, להשמיד אותי ואת בני יחד. But basically, she tells him, and she uses this very interesting parable. She says it's like water on the ground. Once it spills, death, once you kill, basically it's irrevocable. You can't turn it back. And she's making the case for saying that it's not that it was just what happened, and it's not that she doesn't want to save her son because that's the just thing to do, but because at some point somebody has to put an end to violence. There's no the cycle. In order to end the cycle, somebody has to absorb a lack of justice, and this convinces David. David afterwards sort of abdicates his throne for a while in order to avoid civil war. We know his famous kina. How do you say a kina in English? I don't know. No, lekonen, like we say kinot and Tisha B'Av, lamentations. He says, "Mi ten moti tachtecha b'ni Avshalom," and he does it publicly. He doesn't. This isn't a private lamentation. He's standing at the gates of the city when he says this. The gates of the city is the place where judgment is held, right? Sharei mishpat. Traditionally that's where the judges sat in judgment, at the gates of the city. So he's saying something very public about what he thinks happened here. It's also obviously a personal, lamentation of a father for his son, but it's also him telling the people that he doesn't want civil war. And Yoav does not approve. He comes to him and complains that this isn't good, and he also he kills Avshalom. Right, he killed Avshalom, and then he kills somebody else. I don't remember. He's very into killing Yoav, and that's why Jewish people, at least in my opinion, didn't name after Yoav. I don't know any Yoav until Zionism sort of brought that name back into use. I don't think 100 years ago there were any Yoavs in the world. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I can't think of anyone. Religious, not religious, in Ashkenazi Jewry and Sephardic Jewry, can't think of anyone named Yoav. So I think that's very significant. And Avshalom also was a very rare name. Today, obviously, it's more popular. Because Avshalom also, he represents sort of obstruction of justice. Like he doesn't accept that you have to bend to the laws in order to prevent wars. And obviously, I'll end with the famous midrash about David HaMelech that says, "Lo tivne bayit lishmi ki damim rabim shafachta." At the end of his days, he wants to build Beit HaMikdash, which was the whole purpose of all of this of this kingdom, to have this, this place. And but he's not being told you were wrong for doing it. He's being told there's a certain level of violence that doesn't go along with a Beit Mikdash, a place of holiness and of prayer is not a place for violence, and therefore you cannot be the one to do it, even though no one's saying, at least not explicitly, that that the violence was unjustified in his case, except for Uriah, right? Like his wars are not being put as completely unjustified. They're just being put in a certain place where you cannot have that together with ongoing holiness. And so these are my takeaways from this story. Obviously, other people can have other takeaways, and obviously there's a lot more to go in depth, but that's what I wanted to share with you.